April 1945. The world holds its breath as the final act of World War II in Europe is about to unfold. The stage is Berlin, the capital of Nazi Germany, and the players are the unstoppable Soviet Red Army and the last desperate defenders of the Third Reich. This is the story of the Battle of Berlin, a conflict that would reduce a city to rubble and bring an end to one of history's darkest chapters. By early 1945, Nazi Germany was teetering on the edge of total collapse. From the west, the Allied forces had crossed the Rhine and were pushing deep into German territory. From the east, the Soviet Red Army, a behemoth of over 2.5 million soldiers, 6,250 tanks, and 7,500 aircraft, had advanced through Poland and was now at Germany's doorstep. Yet, in his bunker beneath the streets of Berlin, Adolf Hitler refused to see the writing on the wall. He clung to a deluded fantasy that a final fanatical defense of the capital could miraculously turn the tide of the war, or at least buy him a more favorable surrender. He issued a chilling order. Berlin would be defended to the last man, the last bullet. Every able-bodied citizen, from teenage boys to elderly men, was conscripted into the Volkssturm, a last-ditch militia, to fight alongside the battered remnants of the Wehrmacht. The task of defending the city fell to General Gotthard Heinrici, a seasoned defensive specialist, who knew the odds were impossible. Facing him were two of the Soviet Union's most formidable commanders, Marshal Georgy Zhukov and Marshal Ivan Konev. Their plan was a classic pincer movement. Zhukov's first Belarusian front would launch a frontal assault from the east, directly across the Oder River. Simultaneously, Konev's first Ukrainian front would attack from the south, cross the Nysa River, and then swing north to encircle the city, cutting it off completely. The Soviets were under no illusions. They knew Berlin was a fortress. 3 concentric rings of defense, bristling with trenches, minefields, anti-tank barricades, and fortified buildings, stood in their way. Hitler had declared that every street, every building, every single room, was to be a stronghold, defended to the death. The battle for Berlin would be a meat grinder. On the dawn of April 16, 1945, the sky over the Oder River lit up with the fire of thousands of Soviet cannons. It was one of the most intense artillery bombardments in history, the prelude to Zhukov's assault. His forces surged across the river, but they were immediately met with ferocious resistance on the Silo Heights, a strategic ridge heavily defended by over 100,000 German soldiers. The fighting was savage. For 4 agonizing days, the Soviets clawed their way up the slopes, suffering horrific casualties against the well-entrenched Germans. But the sheer weight of Soviet numbers and firepower was unstoppable. They eventually broke through, shattering the first of Berlin's defensive rings. While Zhukov was locked in the bloody struggle for the Silo Heights, Konev's southern thrust was advancing with lightning speed. His forces captured key towns and, as planned, wheeled north. By April 25, a date that would go down in history, Zhukov's and Konev's forces linked up at the town of Ketzen, southwest of Berlin. The encirclement was complete. The German capital was now an isolated island, completely cut off from the outside world. There would be no reinforcements, no resupply, no escape. On that very same day, in a powerful symbol of the closing vice on Nazi Germany, Soviet and American soldiers met and shook hands at the Elbe River, linking the eastern and western fronts, and effectively cutting Germany in two. With the city surrounded, the final battle for Berlin itself began on April 26. What followed was urban warfare at its most brutal. Soviet soldiers pushed into the city's outskirts, fighting not just block by block, but building by building, floor by floor, and room by room. The streets became a hellscape of rubble, fire, and death. German defenders, a mix of exhausted Wehrmacht veterans and barely trained Volkssturm fighters, used the ruins as cover, launching desperate counterattacks. Civilians were trapped in the horrific crossfire. Thousands were killed as they tried to find safety, with even bomb shelters becoming tombs when hit by artillery or bombs. The city's defenders, despite their fanaticism, were simply no match for the battle-hardened and heavily armed Soviet troops, as the Red Army tightened its grip, closing in on the very heart of the city. Hitler and his inner circle retreated into the subterranean world of the Vorbunker, a concrete tomb beneath the Reich Chancellery. In this surreal, claustrophobic environment, detached from the apocalyptic destruction raging just above their heads, the final days of the Nazi regime played out like a bizarre opera. On April 29, Hitler married his longtime partner, Eva Braun. The next day, April 30th, with the sounds of Soviet gunfire now audible and their troops just a few hundred yards away, Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide. Following his final instructions, their bodies were carried up to the Chancellery garden, doused in gasoline, and set ablaze. The architect of so much death and destruction had met his end. With Hitler gone, the will to fight evaporated from the city's command. On May 2, General Helmuth Weidling, who had taken command of the Berlin defense in the final days, formally surrendered the city to the Soviets. The remaining German soldiers laid down their weapons, and an eerie silence fell over the ruins. The Battle of Berlin was over. The cost was staggering. The Soviets had paid a heavy price for their victory, with around 81,000 soldiers killed and another 280,000 wounded in just over 2 weeks of fighting. German military losses were estimated at 92,000 killed, with another 220,000 captured. The civilian toll was even more heartbreaking. With estimates ranging from 100,000 to 200,000 dead, the city of Berlin was a ghost of its former self. Over 80% of its buildings were destroyed or heavily damaged. The streets were an impassable maze of rubble, littered with the grim debris of war. The fall of Berlin was the death knell for Nazi Germany. A few days later, on May 7, 1945, Germany signed an unconditional surrender. The next day, May 8, celebrated as VE Day Victory in Europe, Day the war in Europe was officially over. The brutal Battle of Berlin was the final, tragic crescendo of a conflict that had engulfed the globe and claimed more than 60 million lives. It stands as a testament to the terrible cost of tyranny and the futility of Hitler's final, murderous stand. For the Soviet Union, it was a moment of immense national pride, having played a decisive role in crushing the Nazi war machine. Today, Berlin is a vibrant, rebuilt metropolis, a symbol of resilience and renewal. But the scars of 1945 remain, etched into the city's memory. Memorials, museums, and even a simple plaque marking the location of the former Vorbunker serve as constant reminders of the horrors of war. The Battle of Berlin is not just a chapter in a history book. It's a profound lesson about the depths of human cruelty and the enduring importance of standing for peace and against tyranny. It was the final battle that ended a nightmare and, however fragile, allowed the world to dream of a new dawn. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most pivotal moments.